Before we start, Ami, would you like to introduce yourself? And I know that you are a great coach and you are supporting and providing teachers and schools in so many ways. You can just shortly introduce yourself and your background and what is your favorite part in supporting teachers.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I'm really honored for you to say that. That just touches my heart. Feels really good. So thank you. I'm an educator coach and a family coach and have been doing that for many decades, as you can tell from my gray hair. But my background started, I'm a dance movement therapist and expressive arts therapist originally, and began working with children, with teenagers especially originally. When I first started my career, and loved it so much, doing therapeutic work with children in an inpatient setting in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you've got any Atlanta people here, I'm in Portland, Oregon, and I've turned my attention a few years ago to full-time coaching and consulting and professional development and that kind of thing for folks all around the world. So I'm super excited about doing that. My goal and mission in the work that I do is to come alongside people who work with children, all the important adults in the lives of children. That includes teachers, assistant teachers, guides, support staff, families, grandmas, aunties, and figure out how you can show up in the best way possible as an important adult in the lives of children and in the lives of all the children that you love in your community, in your classroom, in your living room. So that's the work that I do. I've been with schools, mostly Montessori schools for my career, turned from teenagers to preschoolers and have never turned back. So I'm so excited to have had that opportunity to work alongside Montessorians that I have incredible respect for, and have surrounded myself with mentors that I really love and respect, and that I go to say, this happened, help, what do you think? And maybe we can touch on that and talk about that in our conversation, how to surround yourself and who do you surround yourself when you're stumped, when you don't know the answer, or when you're really struggling and you are at the end of your rope and you don't know what to do. Who are the people that you could reach out to? And do they know that? Do they know that they're a person for you that can let you know, hey, you're doing that thing with your face again? Or, okay, your tone sounds really harsh. Let's take a deep breath. Or can I step in for you? Or hey, I notice. And then what do they notice? And what are they curious about? And then that kind of partnership can develop to be really helpful as we're all growing to be better and better for all the children that we're surrounded by.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
That's the work that I do.
That's great. So today our topic is sometimes I can help myself, how I can get in my own way. And yes, we had some days where no matter how we try, we just had our days. And we want children to be quiet, they're not. We want them to work alone and they don't. They can't stop moving around. And in those moments, we might still believe in child and in their potential, but how we can recognize and find that balance that we still want to follow the child, but it's overwhelming and it's over our expectations.
For sure. I'd love to start that part of our conversation with the piece of truth that the way that we were surrounded by important adults when we were kids influences the way that we show up for children as their adult. Right? The way that our teachers, our family, all the adults we were surrounded by when we were little kids are inside of us. We've internalized those messages that we've heard over and over again. And often those messages come out of our mouth when we ourselves are struggling, when we're having a hard time, when we're not hydrated, when we haven't had a time to self-regulate. The way that our adults showed up for us tends to be the way that we show up for children as adults, unless or until we take a look at that and do some honest self-reflection on how do I want to show up? And oh gosh, I'm really dysregulated right now. I'm having big emotions. I'm feeling all of these ways. These children won't listen to me. They're running around, they're flipping tables, or I just feel annoyed. I feel a big emotion. And that's when those messages that we know that's not what I want to say. That's not how I want to say it. And when we are dysregulated is when we're more apt to have those messages come out of our mouth, whether we mean to or not. How many of you here, if you've been in a place where you went in the classroom or surrounded by children and they were just really getting on your nerves? Because it's true. We are honest, please. We are human. And we've been at that place where we're like, oh, and we say something that we go, oh my gosh, I sounded just like my mother, or just like my second grade teacher, Miss Fox, who was mean as a snake. I don't want to do that. And we do it, right? Who's done that? Who's done that
Absolutely.
past week, right? Yes. Yeah, we're not alone. We're surrounded by people who, if they look honestly at themselves and recognize that we are human, we make mistakes and we fall into, sometimes I call it into mud puddles, right? We have typical mud puddles or common mud puddles that all of us can slip into every now and then. So there are 4 main ways that we can get in our own way. I call them self-sabotages. And certainly this work and the idea of self-sabotage and these 4, actually there are 5, but the 5th one's kind of a surprise. It's a sneaky one. But these 4 common ways we get in our own way was put together and developed by a woman named Joanne Nordling, who's an author of a book called Caring Discipline. And her work with children and with families over many decades offers great insight to how we show up for children, right? If you want to go and find that book, I recommend it. I know that it's due for an update. It hasn't been updated in several years. So it's time for it to be, some of the language to be updated and some of the concepts to be opened up a little bit. So I'll just put that caveat out there. But in its essence, the tools that she describes that work with children are so helpful. So the self-sabotages, what are those for? I know you guys are dying to hear. So each of us have a way that we get in our own way that we're really good at. And we tend to do those things when we're dysregulated, when things are, I'm from the Southeast United States originally, so we would call that being off the chain, when we are falling apart ourselves and we need to take a deep breath, ground ourselves, get some water, do some movement, stretch, let some time pass, and then we can get back to our best self, right? However, we do trip up and we make mistakes because we're human. So one of the first common ones is talking way too much, right? So it's the sabotage is talking. When a child is falling apart or they're having a hard time or a struggle, and we just keep talking and we say things like, how many times do I have to tell you? Or we repeat their name over and over again, or we think that, Amy, this is a teachable moment. I don't need to miss this. I need to teach how to ask a friend to play, how to ask for a turn to share, how to do all the things. But in that moment, if the child themselves is there, if they're dysregulated, they won't be able to process any words, right? Because we know that about children, and we know that about people and human development, that language processing skills are growing when children are really young. So it's going to take them a beat or 2 or more to hear what we're saying, to understand what it is that we're saying, and decide what they want to do, and then do the thing. That can take some time. It takes some time for us, and we're grown adults, right? So in those moments when things are going sideways, when those bothersome behaviors are showing themselves in your classroom, notice, am I talking way too much? Am I putting an expectation on the child to process with their frontal lobe, which is still under construction, right? Am I expecting them to have a response or a reaction right away? So those of us who are really good at talking, I have to tell you, that one's mine. I'm really good at that. Look, I made a career out of it. But talking way too much at the moment when children aren't able to process, right? They're thinking about the injustice of not being able to have a turn with the red ball. That's their favorite red ball. And we're here talking and talking. what we inadvertently do is we add stress to the child, which in turn increases their struggle, which increases the possibility that they're going to hit or bite or do another behavior that we find bothersome, right? So talking is one. And let's see, there's another one that's called procrastination. And it's very different from talking. And it kind of shows up like this when something's happening and we think, well, it's not so bad. It's really not my job to do that. That's really the lead guide's job, or that's really my assistant's job, or I'm just so tired. I can't say anything right now. So we don't address it in a way that is necessary, right? We might just turn and go over here or ignore it, right? We procrastinate for whatever reason, right? That's another one that creeps up as well. Let's see, another one is negative phrasing and negative scripting. And that kind of taps into the language that we use, that we heard as children, and language that we're learning from the other adults that we're surrounded by. You know how sometimes it can be contagious, phrases that colleagues or we hear other adults around us using that aren't so great when we really look at them, but we notice ourselves saying them. That's when mirror neurons can get in the way, right? Okay, so we find ourselves saying things like, I told you to get off the table. Why do you always do that? Am I going to have to call your mother? Right? So negative phrasing can be the words that we use, the tone that we use, and the way that we use our body, right? And we could talk more about those three aspects of communication later if you want to, but it's really powerful how we use our words and our tone and our body to communicate, right? Our body is really powerful. Here's the dance therapist side of me and the movement analyst side of me. But our body carries about 55% of the message, right? The words carry about 7%, right? So the rest is carried by our tone, which is 30-some%, right? So when we find that in that moment, we're using a tone or words or a facial expression that can look like this, that's not helpful, right? So those kinds of responses on our part can fall into the category of negative phrasing, right? Some of us might be really good at that. It shows up and we go, oh gosh, I'm doing that thing again. And what can we do to stop doing that? Okay, so let's see, talking, negative phrasing, procrastination, and let's see, the next one is really important. So it's forgetting to connect with the child, especially connecting with the child during neutral times. So this is a sabotage that's sneaky. So if we're not doing the work to connect with children, to have a relationship with them where they know that they can trust us and depend on us, and they know that we're there to be their champion, to help them out as much as possible, right? Not to do things for them, but to be that emotional support, that emotional connection. And the way that we make that connection, we could talk more about that too in a minute, is when we let them know that they are so important to us, right? Do we light up when they enter the room? And that's Joanne Nordling referred to that as connecting at neutral times, right? So when they enter the classroom, do we smile? Do we wave? Do we wink? I don't know. I tend to be a winker, but sometimes people find that weird. So you just have to know your person and know, how am I connecting at times that are neutral? Am I making a reach to connect with that child in a way that's brief and often nonverbal, frequently during the day and during times that are neutral? They're not doing something that's we think is amazing or doing something that's really, we wish they would stop, but they're just existing. They're moving from one place to another. They finished reading that book and they're putting it away on the shelf, or they're rolling up their rug and they're putting it in the basket where it's supposed to go. And what are they going to do next? When they enter into our orbit and we can light up, just like that's a connection at neutral times. Maybe we make eye contact with them across the room. And so we lock eyes and we hot, watch, we smile or we brighten just a little bit, right? It's super subtle and it's really powerful, right? Now, I want to be clear because oftentimes this is misunderstood. And I hear folks say, Amy, I'm not that kind of jazz handsy teacher. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about that moment of recognition and the message that we relay that says, I see you and I'm glad about that. Super subtle. So I challenge everybody here to figure out what it is that you already do to connect with children during neutral times in a way that's short and ideally nonverbal. The universal connection at neutral times is this, is a smile, right? So we can all practice that, right? Oftentimes, when bothersome behavior increases in the classroom, and I'm coaching teachers and school leaders on how to deal with behavior that they wish would stop in their classroom, one of the first tools that I talk about is connecting at neutral times, right? Just crank up the frequency, do that more, right? Remind the child that you are happy to see them. They are in your space and you're glad about that. Do you guys know the poet Toni Morrison? She's an American writer, activist, storyteller, artist, amazing writer. So Toni Morrison has a quote and she says, do your eyes light up when they enter the room? Your child or anybody else's child? That's what they're looking for. Doesn't that make everybody just want to cry?
It's amazing.
Because it's so true. And as humans, we want to have that connection as well between your colleagues, your teaching team members. Do you light up when they enter your orbit? So it could be that when you increase that connection at neutral times, most of the time you will see a decrease in bothersome behavior, the behavior that you don't want to see, behavior that might be self-indulgent or not minding or routine not minding or even aggressive behavior. You will see a decrease in that when you increase your connection, especially the connection at neutral times. They don't have to do anything to get our attention and our smile or our wink or our wave or our shoulder shimmy. They don't have to do anything except exist and be in the space around us to get that recognition that they're noticed and they're loved for just being who they are.